Rise and shine, Private. It's a new day at Sabbath School boot camp. It's time for training. Our mission is to get you prepared to have a creative and critical discussion of this week's lesson. So get out of bed. Let's get to work. Our topic this week is on the power of personal testimonies. Personal testimonies do have relative power, which is why every diet ad is some person saying, I did this and lost 1,000 pounds. And then they throw in some fake explainer with language you've never heard of, like the good midichlorians in one pill releases stored fat and allows you to move objects with your mind.
Side effects may include a sudden turn to the dark side.
Look, we can laugh about this stuff, but they obviously work well enough. We generally find other people's journeys of transformation to be credible. Now, there are limits to the persuasiveness of personal testimony, however. It might be something that you want to discuss with your class because it's not discussed in the lesson. Now, the author writes, it is difficult to argue against personal experience. People may debate your theology or interpretation of a text, but when an individual can say, I once was hopeless, but now have hope, even skeptics are impacted by the power of the gospel. I said we generally find other people's journeys of transformation to be credible. Generally. Because obviously, Muslims talk about their special encounters with Allah, and New Agers will swear by their experiences as well. Does that mean all experience is purely subjective and unbelievable? No, but it is worth considering exactly where the power in a personal testimony actually lies. What are its strengths and its limitations? As a conversation starter, I'd suggest a personal testimony has reached the limit of its persuasive power when it no longer seems personal, when it seems like you're just towing the party line, or that your story was bought, or that you're just offering cliches like, I once was hopeless, but now have hope. And I should add, testimonies have their limits, which is why we often see miracles as confirmation of a testimony's veracity. And we're going to encounter one such miracle on Tuesday's lesson. But for now, let's move on to Sunday. On Sunday, I love this idea of unlikely witnesses. I mean, God really does love to speak through all sorts of odd people, including me. But in this story, found in Mark chapter 5, Finley asks a really interesting question. When Jesus heals a demon-possessed man, the man begs to follow Jesus, but Jesus says no, telling him to go home and to tell those people at home how much the Lord has done for you. Jesus' whole ministry with his disciples was to train them to be his witnesses. It took them nearly 4 years of being with Jesus until they were ready to go. It's striking that this demon-possessed man graduated from Jesus University, not in 4 years, but in about 15 minutes. In this moment, this man understood everything that he needed to know about Jesus, that God is in the world freeing us from the evil one and empowering us to tell others how they can be free also. Those who are the most oppressed by the devil are often the quickest to grasp the gospel. Now, Jesus won't graduate us and commission us until we grasp the gospel. And for some people, that takes a moment. And for some people, that takes a really long time. But what matters is that you get it. On to Monday's training. I love this resurrection story with the two Marys, and particularly Mark 16, verse 6, when the angel basically tells them, you are looking for Jesus who was crucified, but he's not here. He is risen. You've come here seeking the past, the victim, the defeated, the pawn. You won't find this person. This person doesn't exist anymore. Now you are left behind because the person you are seeking is actually way ahead of you. So go get his disciples and tell them to meet this new risen Jesus in Galilee. There you will see him just as he said. Every one of us must come to this tomb. You have nothing to say to anyone until you come here, because you'll just be proclaiming yesterday's news, the bad news, the old news. The words, your words, will be the words of defeat and death and suffering. You'll be proclaiming Friday when it's Sunday and a new week has come. So let last week go. Let Friday with its tidings of death and disappointment just die. To speak of Friday when it's Sunday is to resurrect Friday, not in newness of flesh, but as a haunting zombie. So until you encounter the good news, keep your mouth shut. At the same time, Finley brings up a good point when he writes, if even Jesus' own disciples didn't immediately believe, we shouldn't be surprised if others don't immediately accept our words either. There's a lot of Friday-minded people out there. Sometimes it takes some time to realize that the world has changed. So be patient with people and don't be so quick to write them off. On Tuesday, we encounter the consequences of being witnesses. Namely, that some people don't want the world to change. They don't want good news. They don't like that you have been empowered to proclaim it. Because how could you possibly know something that they, the guardians of power, don't know? They are the newsmakers, and they will resist your attempts to talk about good news, new news. And can we just pause for a moment and appreciate that Mark Finley calls Peter a loudmouth fisherman? Anyway, you'll notice that you cannot silence someone with something to say. And trust me, I have a 5-year-old, I know. Peter and the gang healed a man, and the authorities respond rather pathetically. Oh, well, you need a permit for that. Just don't go tell anyone that you healed this person, or else we're going to do something. As I said earlier, the healing of the man is a confirmatory miracle. Peter is proclaiming the good news of the resurrection. Well, it's debatable, right, what happened to Jesus. But the Sanhedrin cannot deny that this man was previously blind, and now he stands before them with his eyes open. It's not enough to proclaim this transformation. You actually have to be transformed. And a lot of Christians out there have the language of resurrection, the language of good news, but they're still dead inside. And maybe you have seen others resurrected, but one must experience this for themselves for your proclamation to have any power. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Class dismissed. We'll see you next week.